Hello, my name is Jaime Pena, and the claim I'm responding to is strict gun control laws have negative effect on crime rates than states that do not. The opponent's secondary claims that I'm refuting are: number one, states that allow residents to carry concealed weapons have lower crime rates than states that do not. Guns are inanimate objects. Number two is guns are inanimate objects and never act alone. There is always a person behind them. Number three is gun laws do nothing but help the criminals and harm the law-abiding citizens. And number four is ineffectiveness of laws. In response to claim one, when reinforcing the evidence, states that allow residents to carry concealed weapons have lower crime rates than those that do not, an inference is made that Chicago, District of Columbia, and New York City all have strict gun laws and yet are high crime areas. This is in comparison to such states like Texas, Arizona, and Montana that have considerably lower crime and loose gun control. This is an indirect statistic that does not account enough for other factors such as Chicago and New York City are large populated cities being compared to states such as Texas, Arizona, and Montana for comparison of gun control laws. Inference can be made that the difference in crime rates is due to other factors such as more populated denser cities of Illinois and New York as compared to the lesser populated states of Montana, Arizona, and the less densified cities of Texas. Montana as a whole possesses an entire population less than 1 million, and Arizona a total of 6 million. Although Texas contains 24 million population, two of their biggest cities, San Antonio and Dallas, combined possess less than Chicago's 3 million residents. New York City by itself has 8 million population and 19 million statewide. Chicago has a population of 3 million and a state population of 12 million. I would say crime easily has a higher correlation with population density than gun control. He used as support that 3 out of 5 felons polled agree that a criminal is not going to mess with the potential victim if they know that victim is armed, is an invalid supported claim. What is to say that the other 2 felons who didn't agree due to the idea of approaching a victim armed as well? It says nothing about how criminals will make decisions when they are armed as well. In response to his second claim, to say that guns are inanimate objects and do not act alone is short of the whole picture. Take, for example, Sumner Floyd, the shooter who went on the Virginia Tech shooting spree, an example that Commonwealth laws did not cause this tragedy, but maybe did enable some Troy. The control in question is the ease in which someone who belonged in a mental institution was able to obtain firearms and ammunition legally. Troy, after all, was a person who apparently had a track record of harassing people and who was involuntarily committed to psychiatric treatment and was allowed to obtain firearms and ammunition legally. This is all information gathered from the Virginia Pilot, an article written April 25th, 2007, a source right after the Virginia Tech incident. The reason in gun law and control doesn't mean that the population will be starved of guns and taken advantage by those that do have them. The mission is to prevent legally purchased guns to go in hands of people like Troy. If the fix results in a minor increase in the inconvenience of obtaining legal firearms by the nominally sane, not insane, so be it. When mentioning that gun control laws are ineffective, it is an improper example to mention that gun control laws allow an 18-year-old to buy a rifle but not a handgun. The whole purpose is not to control our choices, but to regulate on young people acquiring a gun that can be concealed. A lot of the evidence we used was irrelevant, and I could not establish credibility because of not being able to find my opponent's resources myself. Even though trends may be going towards gun rights, some 85% of gun owners and 81% of Americans would endorse a bill to require background checks for all guns sold at gun shows. An even larger share of gun owners, 90%, would support a bill to beef up background check databases to better prevent the mentally ill and drug abusers from buying guns. Republican Caroline McCarthy of New York wants to ban extended magazines like the ones used in the Tucson shooting. Senator Charles Schumer of New York wants the federal background check database to include people rejected by the military for drug use, a measure that would have prevented Tucson suspected Jared Lee Lardner from buying a gun legally in the Tucson shootings. All this information is gathered from an article written Tucson Shootings Spotlights U.S. Shifts on Gun Control, written January 24, 2011. And I end with that there is no clear evidence presented to really show a negative effect on crime by gun control laws. Thank you.
All right, the structural issues are pretty clear, and I thought even toward the end when you said that there was a little bit of trouble following the advocate's points, you did a pretty good job trying to find the evidence to respond to. Your signpost on the first point is pretty clear. You've got some statistical contrast that you provide us. I think that these are mostly presses that you're giving on this first point, and the argument is that the advocate's inference is perhaps not sustainable over the length of the comparisons that are being made, the nature of the things that are being compared. I think if you had any counter evidence on this point, it would help make that a little bit more convincing. As it is, it sounds like it's mostly just legitimate questions about whether or not the advocate's inference is right. So they're good reasoning challenges, but they're not necessarily strong counter arguments by themselves. The crime issue, relationship to population, I think that it's a good counterclaim on that point, although I'm not exactly sure that that undermines the advocate's claim. It just suggests another explanation. And again, it's a press on the argument rather than a definitive counterpoint. On the transition to the second point, it was very clear. You've got the explanation about why some gun laws are a little too loose, and you use Troy as an example, and the whole Virginia Tech illustration, that there's widespread acceptance of certain kinds of limitations or background checks at gun shows. I suppose that suggests that there isn't really anything to worry about if the advocates of having access to guns want these kinds of restrictions. That seems to be the inference that you're drawing here, but this is where it all starts to get a little bit iffy about how your position contrasts to the advocate's position. And maybe part of that is because there was difficulty in figuring out what the advocate's position was on those particular points. You got sidetracked on this issue about handguns versus rifles for kids. I'm not sure that the advocate had a valid point. I'm not sure that you've got a valid point, but I do know that both of you spent some time on it, so it ought to be a little bit clear what it is you're trying to say there. All right, and I thought you did a nice job trying to keep clear and follow the arguments as best you could. All right, thank you.